Hey guys, welcome back to lesson 3 of the church lighting game plan. I'm David Henry from LearnStageLighting.com, and in this video I want to talk about programming and playback with programming the whole service in lighting cues. So when we're programming the whole service, I got into this a little bit in the last video. What we want to do is create some basic cues that allow a lighting volunteer to play back the whole service with, 5 or 6 different cues. So we're going to have a few different cues. For example, we're going to have a cue for the walk-in. Write that down, actually. Walk in. We're going to have a cue for the music, a cue for the offering, and your church may do all this stuff in a different order. I'm just going through it in the order that my church goes through it. But of course, some people put the offering at the end, some near the start, some in the middle. It's usually accompanying music, of course. Then we've got the sermon. And then we've got the same cue, again for the music. And I've run out of space, but then we get the same cue for walk out. So now that you've watched my messy handwriting, let's talk about this. So basically, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different cues that make up your service. You might have more. You might have, for example, thinking of the church I grew up in, we had a cue called funeral and one called communion. Of course, I forgot that one. It's not every week I'm in my church, so I wasn't thinking about it, but it is in some churches. We do it once a month, but again, everybody does it differently. And what you're doing here basically is you want to create, a cohesive feel week to week. And so you're programming out these different cues. And so in a console like DMX is, you would just make a single bank. And inside that single bank, you would just have all these presets, and then the operator could click the preset that you wanted, and it would load. You could also alternatively, just to hybridize a few of these program schemes together, you could program a few color cues as well, and maybe do one color per song. And so in NTEC DMXs, you would have one bank and then many presets. Now, if we were doing this in Show Express, what you do with Show Express is you basically make a bank of buttons on your screen or mapped to a MIDI controller like this. And then you could have a whole ton of buttons or just a few. And then you could use, say, you could have this cue. Here's your walk-in, and then this one's your sermon. This one's your music. This one's your communion, your offering, funeral, and whatever else you may program. Whether that be some different colored looks or what have you. And so that's how you could program the whole service into Show Express. Meanwhile, in MPC, if you've got an M-Touch or some other kind of faders, or if you're just using the on-screen faders, you've got, say, 10 faders. So we'll draw 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that should be 10 faders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It is. And you could just record a cue on each fader. And so this fader could be walk-in. This one could be music. This one could be sermon. This one could be, what are we talking about? Communion, etc. And you would just want to make sure with all of these cues that you are recording all the lights in every cue, because on a console like the M-Touch, and actually Show Express is the same way, you need to program every light that you want to change, or else the value will carry over from any other cue that's using it. So that may have been a little abstract, but say you've got 5 lights, just to simplify it, and you only use 4 of those lights in this cue. And then you use 3 of the lights in this cue, the second cue. If you had brought this cue up with the 4 lights, then 3 of them would change when you bring up this cue, but not the 4th, and it would stay on unless you programmed it as being off. And so it's very important that if you're programming your whole service and just having, just a handful of cues that a volunteer is going to pick between, it's very important, that you program all the lights into every cue, or else you might get some funny looking looks. And so that's basically, how you would program the whole service in cues for the 3 consoles I talked about, the N-Tech DMXs, Chave Show Express, and the Martin M-Touch. With the M-Touch as well, forgot to mention this, but you've got your 10 faders, and then below it, you've got 10 playback buttons, as well as 10 in the middle. And with those 20 buttons, I would go ahead and program different color schemes so that you have 20 color schemes you can choose from for songs. And that's kind of hybridizing it a little bit to what we're going to talk about in another video, where we talk about programming all of our color schemes. But first, let's drop down below and check out how to program in each of these consoles if you're programming for songs. I'll see you guys over there.